Welcome back to Balmer's Workshop. Thanks so much for joining me here once again. It's always nice to have you back. It's time to work on the lady in red once again. It's been a long time. I've been busy with shop stuff. I've been a little disillusioned on the old project. Sometimes that's how it goes. Life gets in the way. We know how it is. So my apologies for not having been around with the lady in red project for a while. But I'm back. Judy's not here today. She's taking a day off and taking it easy, which is good for her. She's been working out very hard lately herself. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to fit up some rock sliders to the lady in red. I've offered rock sliders for first and second gen Sidekick Vitaras for a long time now, but they've always been offered as strictly a weld-on product. And I know a lot of people prefer bolt-on, so I'm going to go ahead and modify my design and create some bolt-on brackets, starting with the lady in red. So right now she's got super rusty rockers, which I don't know if the camera's in a position to see how rotten it is back there, but you'll see that in a minute. Obviously, I would not weld some rock sliders in place with these rocker panels still needing to be replaced, but because I have bolt-ons, we can do that. We can bolt them onto the frame, remove them, and fix this rust later on, and that's what we're going to do. I'll fit the sliders up today. We'll weld them to the bolt-on mounts and remove them, and then I'll send them out for powder coating with a couple of other bumpers and other parts that I have waiting to go to powder coat. And then once they get back, we might install them, or maybe we'll replace these rockers beforehand. But anyway, it gives us the option. It gives me the option of selling bolt-on sliders to my customers in the future, and yeah, it's going to work out real well, I think. So let's get started. I have the rock sliders already made, the sliders themselves, and I've got some frame standoffs that are cut a little bit too long right now, so I'll just shorten them once I get my mounts in place. So I'll just grab some blocks and block the slider up into position. I want to get it obviously even with the pinch seam on the bottom of the rocker panel here. I usually give myself about 3/4 of an inch of gap, and I also want to make sure that I get my pitched up angle correct. And I usually set them at 12 to 15 degrees. We'll probably go about 15 on the lady in red. Might be just the tiniest bit too close. And I'll go back here, pop this guy up like so, put that underneath. And that is the tiniest bit too low. So here is the fit up. I always like to make my sliders end pretty much at that bolt right there. So that way if a person goes to massively oversized tires and needs to trim the fender out, you've got about 1 inch of room to play with there. And then we've got a similar setup on the back, about 3/4 of an inch left, just in case a person went to giant tires. But generally when you go to giant tires on the back, you also go to an extended control arm, which pushes the rear wheel backwards anyway, so not as much of an issue back here. And I've set it to, I would say that's probably about 15 degrees. I haven't put an angle finder on it to know that, but looks like about 15 degrees to me. There's a good look at all that rotted rocker panel that will be replaced later on. And now I will grab some frame standoffs and we'll put them in place. I've already got some marks on the sliders. I've got some tape in there that shows me which length of standoff goes to which point. I use 3 standoffs for the 4-door sliders. I only use 2 on the 2 doors because they're just such a short slider that they don't need that extra support. But we'll throw the supports into place, trim them to length, and pretty much get started with this build. Oh, but before I do that, I got to mount all my mounts to the frame itself. So that's the next step actually. And there you can see my mounts are all bolted in position exactly where I want them. I've gone 1 inch away from the rear suspension mount there, just so that I've got a little bit of room, but no more than absolutely necessary. I've centered this one according to the other two, and I've pushed this one as far forward as I reasonably can. I've pretty much gone up against the body mount here, and then on the inside there's also a mount for a cross member. So I've kind of just snuck in between those two, and they're all fastened on with 3/8 grade 8 bolts. All right, so the slider positioning has been double checked and I'm very, very happy with it. It's perfectly centered. The tube is perfectly centered to the pinch seam in the front, and of course also in the back. So we know that we're nice and dead straight. My standoffs are not all the same length because the frame tapers in towards the front. So this one is 9 5/8 inches from the face of this 1/4 inch thick mounting bracket to the valley of the notch where it's going to contact the tube, and the front is 10¼ inches in those same dimensions. So now what I'm going to do is put those in place, hold the slider up with some pressure against the mounts. Once I've got those in place, tack weld them, and then we can go ahead and measure up this middle one. I always leave the middle one till last when I'm dealing with, 3 standoffs. I'll leave the middle till last so that I can get these guys tacked in place, and then all I have to do is measure my gap that's left there, and that's just a simpler way to do it. So that's why for this, at this point, I have only cut my front and rears. I do actually have the other one cut, but it needs to be shortened a little bit. I cut them long at first so that I knew that I had enough room, and I was able to kind of notch everything in advance and make for a faster and easier fit up. And all I had to do again was just shorten these tubes a little bit, which I've done already. So I'll go ahead and pop those into place and tack weld them, and then we'll make that middle one. Everything is tacked in place now. I have tacked my supports or standoffs to the mounts and also to the sliders in all positions. However, I screwed up the front one a little bit. I forgot to check with a square to make sure that this was dead square like I did on the others, and it is not dead square. I've made a little arrow that it needs to move this way. But what I need to do now is cut my tacks. So I'm going to pull this block out of here. Since everything's tacked up, it's not a big issue to remove this block. So I'll take that out to give myself room to cut that tack. And then I'm going to have to probably try to cut that tack as well. But that's going to be really challenging. So I may just try hammering it and hope that that tack lets loose, but we'll see what happens. So I'll do a little cutting, a little correcting, and then this job is nearing completion. And there we are. I have corrected placement of that front standoff, and all is well. Now, I could have left it on a little angle. It really wouldn't have made much of a difference in terms of this particular installation. But again, I want to use these as a template for creating shippable rock sliders that I can send out to customers across the nation and into the States as well. So I want to make sure that these are a perfect example to follow. So I find that looking at the slider from the back side, from underneath the vehicle, is the best way to make sure that your pitch is exactly right, that we're not off with a bad angle. So that because you get a really nice contrast between the pinch seam and the rock slider, and as you can see in this case, it is perfectly even and looks really, really nice. And again, we're at those same points that I discussed earlier where we've got about 3/4 inch to an inch of free space between the tip of the slider and the opening of the fender well in case we ever wanted to trim. And that angle is looking pretty good as well. I never did check it, but I'm guessing it's a little more than 15. It might be about 17 degrees. But the main thing is that it looks nice and we're happy with the way that it looks, and I certainly am. So now what I'm gonna do is replicate all of this that I've done to this slider over to the other one on the bench. And I'll show you exactly how I'm gonna do that in just a few minutes. For me, that'll be a few days, but for you, it will be a few minutes. So now that I'm in this position, I think what I'm going to do is just finish welding everything up on the vehicle. I don't have any concerns with, heating anything too much. I might burn a little bit of the coating off of my frame, but I'm really not worried about that. I can recoat it. And it's nice to do it in place, just make sure that nothing shifts on me, and it's in a nice, convenient location to weld. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I think I'll call it a day. It's Good Friday, and I have dinner with the family scheduled, Judy's family, and so that's going to be a good time, and I do not want to be late for it. So I'll probably just leave this in place on the Lady in Red. It's supposed to be pouring rain over the next few days, so I don't want to put her outside with that on, obviously. But I've got some time on Monday morning to mess around with that, so I'll remove the slider then, and we will replicate the other. I'll get back on video for that, and then we'll send everything out to powder coat, and the Lady in Red will be dressed up with some nice black sliders. And there we are. Mostly welded, but not completely. I've left the tops unwelded because it was just challenging to get up there, and I want to put a gusset in anyway. I've got little 45-degree gussets, which will go in there to strengthen it a little bit more. And I didn't bother welding the tube side just because it was a bit awkward. I think it'll be easier in the vise on the bench where I can rotate it to a perfect position for welding. So that's the next step. But like I said, I am going to get out of here for the day and enjoy my Easter weekend. But we'll lower this guy down, or this lady down, I should say, and have a better look at the way these sliders, or this slider, looks on the vehicle, and I'll get out of here. Looks pretty decent as far as I'm concerned. Dead straight. If you kind of look at the angles or the lines between the pinch seam and the rocker panels as I slowly pan around, you'll see that it sits pretty much dead flat to the pinch seam. Happy with that angle, and it's a nice clean look, I think. I put these little 45-degree end caps on my sliders so that it just gives that little more style to them, makes them look a little nicer in my opinion, as opposed to just a blunt flat end. But otherwise they are a pretty straightforward slider. Those kickers at the back there are what I call half-pipe kickers, because they remind me of a skateboard half-pipe or a BMX half-pipe. And that's it for today, I think. Some decent sliders, and I'm glad to have them. And it's cool to be able to offer bolt-on sliders now to my customers as well. Good day.